The Crusades, pious Christian knights versus a unified Muslim world. A noble quest to reclaim the Holy Land. We all know the images: shining armor, flowing banners, heroic charges for God and glory. At least, that's the postcard version of history we've all been sold. But what if I told you that story is basically a lie? That the Crusades were really a chaotic mess of greed, political backstabbing, and shocking brutality, where Christians were just as likely to slaughter fellow Christians as they were to fight Muslims? What if the so-called heroes of Christendom committed atrocities so vile they actually resorted to cannibalism? This is the real, bloody, and deeply complicated story of the Crusades, where the lines between saint and sinner, faith and greed, were so blurry they all but disappeared. So forget the romance. It's time to uncover the truth. Let's kick things off with the biggest myth of all, that the Crusades were some simple, pious holy war. We're fed this narrative of devout warriors, moved only by faith, marching off to defend Christendom from unprovoked aggression. Now, the truth is way more complex. Were the Crusades partly a response to centuries of Islamic expansion? Yes. By the late 11th century, Muslim armies had conquered huge swaths of formerly Christian land, including North Africa, the Middle East, and most of Spain. The Byzantine emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, was begging the West for help against the Seljuk Turks. So, the idea of a defensive war isn't totally baseless, but it's a dangerously incomplete picture. When Pope Urban II gave his famous sermon at Clermont in 1095, his motives were as much about power as they were about piety. The Pope saw a golden opportunity. By launching a massive holy war, he could assert papal authority over Europe's kings, redirect the violent energy of his warring knights outward, and maybe even heal the great schism that had split the Catholic and Orthodox churches. It was a brilliant political play, gift-wrapped in the language of God's will. And who were these crusaders? Look, many were no doubt driven by sincere faith. They wanted forgiveness for their sins and undertook a journey that was incredibly dangerous and expensive. But for others? For younger sons with no inheritance, disgraced knights, and peasants stuck in a dead-end life, the crusade was a lottery ticket. A chance at land, loot, and a new life. It was an escape. Still, it's vital to remember the immense risk. Lords had to mortgage or sell their lands just to afford the trip. The vast majority who went were pilgrims on a mission, planning to do their duty and then go home. This wasn't a simple story of greed. It was a chaotic cocktail of motives. Faith and fervor stirred together with raw ambition and desperation. So, what about that image of a unified Christian army, marching as one under a single cross? That's our next myth. The reality was more like a dysfunctional family road trip, but with swords. These were fractious, disorganized collections of rival armies, often one argument away from killing each other. The very first wave of the First Crusade, the People's Crusade, tells you everything you need to know. It was a disorganized mob of peasants and low-ranking knights who charged ahead of the main army. Ill-equipped and totally undisciplined, they left a trail of plunder and anti-Jewish violence across Europe before being completely wiped out in Anatolia. Even the professional armies, led by powerful nobles, were packed with infighting. These were proud, ambitious men who constantly bickered over strategy, supplies, and who would get to rule the cities they captured. After the brutal siege of Antioch, the leaders wasted months arguing over who got the keys to the city while their soldiers starved. This wasn't a band of brothers. It was a coalition of rivals, each with his own agenda. But the ultimate betrayal of the crusading ideal, the moment that proves the romantic image is dead wrong, is the Fourth Crusade. Called by Pope Innocent III in 1202 to retake Jerusalem, this crusade never even made it to the Holy Land. Instead, the Crusaders, who were deeply in debt to their Venetian boat drivers, made a deal with the devil. First, they agreed to attack Zara, a Catholic city, to pay off their bill to Venice. The Pope was so furious, he excommunicated the entire army. But it got worse. Lured by the promises of a wannabe Byzantine emperor, The Crusaders diverted their mission to Constantinople, the greatest Christian city in the world. In 1204, they stormed its legendary walls and unleashed 3 days of horror. They looted palaces, desecrated altars in the magnificent Hagia Sophia, and murdered thousands of their fellow Orthodox Christians in the streets. This wasn't a holy war. It was a politically motivated heist that shattered the Byzantine Empire and deepened the schism between the Eastern and Western churches, making it practically irreversible. This brings us to our last, and maybe most disturbing, myth: the idea of the chivalrous crusader fighting an honorable war against a barbarian foe. The truth is, the Crusaders committed acts of such profound brutality they're shocking even by medieval standards. The violence wasn't just a side effect of war. A lot of the time, it was the whole point. Before the First Crusader even reached the Holy Land, some groups started their holy war at home. In 1096, mobs rampaged through Germany's Rhineland, targeting Jewish communities. In cities like Worms and Mainz, they gave Jews a horrific choice: convert to Christianity or die. Thousands were murdered. Many chose to take their own lives rather than abandon their faith. Later popes would condemn these attacks, but the violence was a dark stain on the Crusades from the very start. The atrocities only got worse as the armies moved east. After finally capturing Jerusalem in 1099, the Crusaders unleashed a massacre of breathtaking scale. Chronicles from all sides, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, describe streets literally running with blood. The victorious soldiers killed indiscriminately, slaughtering men, women, and children who had fled to mosques and synagogues for safety. They killed so many that one chronicler bragged about wading through blood up to his ankles. But perhaps the most horrifying episode happened to the city of Myrat al-Numan in 1098. After a long siege, the Crusader army was starving and desperate. What happened next is a nightmare. Multiple contemporary sources confirm that the Crusaders resorted to cannibalism. They cooked and ate the bodies of the local population they had just killed. One chronicler, Radulf of Cannes, wrote of them boiling adult pagans in pots and grilling children on spits. While many historians see this as a desperate act of survival, other chroniclers claim human flesh was being sold in the camp, a sign of the absolute collapse of morality. This wasn't just war. It was an atrocity that revealed the dark, barbaric heart beating under the armor of holy purpose. If this hidden history is blowing your mind, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the